So fellas, since some of the cards coming up are headlined by undefeated fighters, and we've got quite a few ranked undefeated fighters too, I thought I'd predict when every undefeated UFC fighter loses, they all loses for the first time in the UFC. Starting off with probably the best undefeated fighter right now, Ilia Topuria, pound for pound number 1, 17-0. Now obviously Topuria's killing it. Knocks out Volkanovski, knocks out Max Holloway, just knocked out Charles Oliveira, lightweight champion. There's very few people in the UFC that could even come close to even just lasting the distance with Ilia Topuria. He looks unstoppable. He's pound for pound number 1 for a reason. And like I said, he's the best undefeated fighter in the organization right now. When do I think he's going to lose? Honestly, I don't think he's ever going to lose. I'm going to say never for Ilia Topuria. If we look at the only possible threats in the entirety of the UFC that I think could even come close to beating Topuria, it's probably Arman Tsarukyan, Islam Makhachev, and JDM. These are the only guys I see posing a threat. Obviously, realistic matchups. Obviously, you know, someone like Shavkat might pose a threat, but he's never going to fight Shavkat. If we start off with Arman, for example, he's ducking Arman. You know, he's already said he ain't going to fight Arman. I don't think the UFC would make that fight after Arman pulled out against Makhachev. That's unlikely to happen because Arman, and if that fight was to happen, I'd favour Topuria to win that anyway. JDM is just unlikely. If JDM loses to Makhachev, he's obviously never going to fight Topuria, and I don't know if Topuria is still going to move up to 170 unless Makhachev's the champion. The only possible threat is Makhachev, and don't get me wrong, Makhachev, if he can beat JDM, I think him and Topuria would be a super fight at 170, probably a 50-50 fight. But I'm going Topuria by KO. I think he's just that damn good. And he's already said he's going to retire in a few years. He's not here for a long time. He's here for a good time. He beats every other contender in the UFC outside of, I think, Makhachev, like I said. So I don't think he's ever going to lose. Him and Makhachev is the only fight that I could see going in the favor of, you know, somebody else. But Makhachev's going to get through JDM first, which I don't think is going to happen. And I'm still not unsure if Topuria moves up to 170 if JDM's the champion. And if he stays at 155, I mean, come on. Gaethje, Paddy, these are the guys that's going to beat Ilia Topuria? I don't think so. I think Arman's the only threat at 155, and he ain't going to fight Arman. So I honestly can see Topuria riding into the sunset as an undefeated fighter. So I'm going to say never for Ilia Topuria, but what about these former, well, what could have been a former rival, Movsar Evloev at 19-0, one of the better undefeated fighters in the UFC, obviously one of the best wrestlers in the featherweight division, should be next for the belt against Alexander Volkanovski, but obviously there's some stuff going on. Now, he was obviously scheduled to fight Aaron Pico, but that's now obviously fallen off. Evloev's pulled out. Pico's fighting Lerone Murphy. So I feel like it has to be Volkanovski versus Evloev next, or maybe I'm at least hoping for that, because, I mean, who else is there for Volkanovski? So when do I think he's going to lose? I'm a massive fan of Evloev, but if it is going to be him and Volk next, I'm going to say it's going to be his next fight, because there's nobody else for Volkanovski but Movsar Evloev. You know, Yadier's, I guess, in the mix as well, but you've also got Lerone Murphy booked against Aaron Pico. You've got Diego Lopez versus Gene Silva. So unless they give Yair Rodriguez the shot, he probably has to be Evloev. And I think Volkanovski beats Evloev pretty comfortably. We've already seen historically that Volkanovski is a great anti-grappler and just a great wrestler in himself. So I don't think the wrestling would be too much for Volk. And he absolutely lights up Movsar Evloev on the feet. If they fight, I'm favouring Volkanovski to win a pretty dominant, unanimous decision against Movsar Evloev. I think that's stylistically the worst matchup for Evloev in the division. So I think he's going to lose his next fight. If he gets a title fight against Volk, which I'm hoping, and it should be next, I'm going to say he loses to Volkanovski, unless they pull some wicked shit like Yair versus Volkan. They do like Movsar Evloev versus fucking Patricio Pitbull or something. I think if he is going to get the title fight next, which should be the case, I don't see him beating Volkanovski. So I think Volk beats Evloev, and for that reason, I think Evloev will lose his next fight. Michael Morales, 18-0. Again, one of the better undefeated fighters in the UFC. Absolutely blasted Neil Magny just over a year ago, or just under a year ago. Just finished Gilbert Burns to solidify himself as a top contender. With Michael Morales, I think if you look at the top 5, it's got to be someone in the top 5 next. I think the only guy that really makes sense is Leon Edwards. I do believe that the UFC are probably going to do Michael Morales versus Leon Edwards next. It's been rumored to be in September. I think this is probably the way the UFC are going. And I know it's fun to shit on Leon Edwards, but this is a very tough fight for Morales. This ain't another grappler for Leon Edwards. It's another technical striker, former champion. I don't know how that fight goes. Or I don't know how any top contender fares against Michael Morales at this moment in time. So I'm going to say that he's going to lose in about 2 fights time. I think he cracks the top 5. I can see him edging a decision over Leon Edwards. Maybe I don't see him finishing Leo, maybe edging a decision, and maybe there's someone else that he beats in the top 5 to get to that level. So I can see him cracking the top 5 but losing to the elite. You know, when he starts facing the likes of Sean Brady, Shavkat, Makhachev, if obviously that's never going to happen, but if he were to face Makhachev or JDM, I see him losing to those guys. So I'm going to say 2 fights time. I can see Morales breaking the top 5, becoming a top contender, but then when he gets like a number 1 contender fight or even a title fight, that's where I see Morales losing. So I'm going to say 2 fights down for Morales. Beats Leon Edwards and then goes and loses to whoever is the top contender at the time. Hyun Sung Park, who's going to be headlining the UFC event this week, 10-0, fairly new into the UFC. But he's one of the better prospects at flyweight. Good submission ability. Also have really dangerous boxing. One of the more dangerous up-and-coming flyweights we've got on the roster. And like I said, booked this week to fight Tatsuro Taro. When do I think Hyun Sung Park's going to lose? I think he loses tomorrow. I'm picking Tatsuro Taro to beat him. I've already done a prediction video on this. I do favour Tatsuro Taro to beat Hyun Sung Park, even though I think, you know, some people might be overlooking Hyun Sung Park. I did say he's one of the better prospects in this division, and I do think one day he'll crack the top 10, but this is a big step up too soon on short notice against Taro. I'm picking Taro to win, and for that reason, I think Hyun Sung Park will lose tomorrow in the main event. Torrez Finney. Some people, you know, love this guy for the run that he had to go through to get into the UFC, but after his couple of performances, I think it's pretty evident people want this guy out the UFC. He's 11-0, and again, known for going 3 times in the Contender Series and has one of the most boring, bland styles. Also one of the weirdest builds I've seen in the UFC. I think it's evident that the UFC hate this guy. I mean, if making him go through the Contender Series 3 times weren't enough, I can see the UFC punishing this guy next, and I think they're going to feed him to an absolute killer next. So when do I think he's going to lose? Honestly, I think he's going to lose his next fight. Whether they book him against Azamat Murzakanov again, whether they do him against somebody like Greg Rodriguez, Ikram Aliskerov, I can see the UFC feeding Torrez Finney to an absolute killer in the middleweight division. And he just hasn't impressed me so far as Torrez Finney. I mean, the fight with Robert Valentin, you look at what Ateba Gorty did to Robert Valentin, you look at what Torrez Finney did, stole him against the cage across 15 minutes. Don't get me wrong, won the decision pretty dominantly, but it wasn't really a performance, it was just a smudge. So I think Torrez Finney, you give him any decent striker with anti-grappling, is getting laid out. The UFC aren't going to build this guy. They're going to feed him to a killer so that they can cut him from the UFC and give him an excuse to cut him from the UFC. So I think he's going to lose probably his next fight, depending on who they book him against. So Torrez Finney, undefeated no more. If he would have faced Bekelev, which I think was scheduled for this week, I'd have favoured Bekelev to beat him anyway. So I think Torrez Finney will lose his next fight. Jacobe Smith, 11-0. Now, Jacobe Smith has everything to be a top contender. He comes from this big collegiate wrestling background. He's been praised by DC. He's got KO ability on the feet. Absolute monster in the welterweight division. And you look at his rate as well. I mean, 73% of his wins by KO. A submission in there as well. Absolute beast. Now, I said that this guy was going to be in the top 5 of the welterweight division a couple of weeks back. And since then, he's gone out there and submitted Nico Price. But that showed us that he has an awful gas tank. He's not flawless now. If this guy had a good gas tank, he'd be absolutely unstoppable. So when do I think he's going to lose? I think when he hits the top 15 is when we're going to see Jacobe Smith slow down. I can see him going out there and pummeling another guy unranked in the welterweight division because he's really talented. He's got good wrestling, good submission ability, hits like a fucking truck, strong as fuck too, comes from a collegiate wrestling background. He's an absolute beast. It's just a gas tank. But I think he loses to most of the welterweight rankings as of now. Again, the guy's had 2 fights in the UFC. It's too early to say if he becomes a top 15 contender, so it's a bit early to say for Jacobe Smith, but I'm going to say that when he hits the top 15 of the welterweight division, when he gets on that ranking area, that's where it's going to slow down. That's where it's going to lose. I'm going to go Jacobe Smith, hits the top 15. That's where it's going to lose. Khamzat Chimaev, the next pay-per-view headliner. Again, one of the better undefeated fighters in the UFC. 14-0. One of the best wrestlers. One of the most dangerous grapplers, if not the most dangerous grappler in the UFC right now. Booked to fight Dricus du Plessis in a couple of weeks' time. When do I think Chimaev's going to lose? Similar to Ilia Topuria, I don't know if Chimaev ever loses. He's booked against Dricus du Plessis. Now, I've said for the longest time, this is a 50-50 fight, and nobody can confidently pick a winner because you cannot confidently pick a winner. It's so 50-50. And I'm a firm believer of whoever wins this fight will reign the middleweight division because there's no other threat. But I'm leaning towards Chimaev. By the skin of my teeth, I'm leaning towards Chimaev to beat Dricus du Plessis. And for that reason, I don't see anybody else at middleweight beating Chimaev. I think he ragdolls Imavov, Baralo, Rainy Derrida. I think Chimaev beats all those guys. I just think he's that good, especially how he looked against Robert Whittaker, how easily he put him out of there. If he can beat Dricus du Plessis, again, it's the big if, the biggest threat he stood in front of him. I'm going to say Chimaev never loses. Obviously, the biggest threat is Dricus. If he can get past Dricus, he never loses, but obviously, he could lose his next fight. I'm leaning towards Chimaev, so I don't know if Chimaev ever loses. I think he beats Dricus du Plessis. Again, not a confident pick at all. I just think he goes out there, takes him down, submits him early on, and then after that, I don't see any other middleweight any other middleweight beating Chimaev. I think he's that damn good. I don't know if Chimaev's ever losing. Then we've got Malcolm Wellmaker. 10-0, probably the best bantamweight prospect, known for a really good right hand, slept. Cameron Simon sent him halfway across the octagon, just knocked out Chris Mutino easily as well. And I think he's probably the best bantamweight prospect right now. So when do I think Malcolm Wellmaker's going to lose again? It's kind of too early. I think when it hits the top 10 is when it's going to be tough for Malcolm Wellmaker. I think the UFC are going to build this guy. They're going to give him quite a favorable match like an Adrian Yanez or a Jonathan Martinez or maybe even like a Corey Garbrandt. They're going to give him quite a favorable matchup, probably a striker next, until he gets to the top 15. And again, I don't know how he does against the top 15. It's way too early. We haven't really seen his gas tank get tested. We've not seen his grappling gets tested. So I'm going to assume that when it hits the top 10, top 15 area of the bantamweight division, that's where he's going to lose, because he's got dynamite in that right hand. He's probably the best bantamweight prospect right now. Looks insane. Improves every fight. Still massively untested in certain areas, similar to when Peyton Talbot was on the rise. We haven't really seen him get tested, but I'm going to assume he hits the top 15, top 10, and that's where he's going to lose. But again, kind of too early to say for Malcolm Wellmaker. Azamat Murzakanov, again, one of the better undefeated fighters in the UFC, 15-0, and for his chubby build, he might be one of the most athletic, chubby fighters in the UFC. Obviously, and evidently very powerful as well. When he lands that big right hand, or just anything for that matter, usually tends to put people out cold. Just knocked out Brenton Ribeiro at UFC 316. So when do I think Azamat Murzakanov's going to lose? I'm going to go out and say when he fights one of the elite of the division. He's booked against Alexander Rakic. I can see him slumping Rakic. Rakic is way too basic and hesitant of a striker. I think when he gets the likes of Magomed Ankalaev, Alex Pereira, Khalil Roundtree, Yuri, essentially the upper echelon, like the elite of the division, that's where Murzakanov's going to fall short. Because to be fair to Murzakanov, he's not flawless. Like, he's got obviously crazy power, but he doesn't seem to be an elite striker like someone like Khalil Roundtree. His gas tank has been tested once against Dustin Jacobe, and it wasn't great. We still don't really know what the grappling of Azamat Murzakanov. So we still got, you know, many unanswered questions. So very powerful dude, too early to say, and I don't think he becomes a champion. He's also like 37 years old and he's quite inactive, so I don't see him being around for way too long. So I think when he fights one of the elites, he's going to lose. I can see him beating Rakic, getting like a title eliminator against somebody like Roundtree or Yuri or one of the top guys, and that's where he loses. So I think when he fights one of the elites, that's where Murzakanov's going to lose. Joo Sang Yoo, 9-0 now. Joo Sang Yoo, obviously from Korean Zombies promotion, had one of the best KOs in 2025 so far. Slumped Jeka Saragit, faced first at the canvas in about 20 seconds. And he's one of my favourite, well, not one of my favourite, but one of my most intriguing featherweight prospects right now. And he looks insane, but again, it's too early to say for Joo Sang Yoo. So when does he lose? I'm going to say when it hits the top 10, and I know that might be quite a brash statement because the top 10 obviously a long way away, but I'm just bought on the hype of Joo Sang Yoo. Even on the regional scene, very crafty guy on the feet, good wrestling, and just to debut like that in the UFC debut, I can see Joo Sang Yoo going quite far. So I think when it hits the top 10, he's going to lose. It's hard to rank these kind of, you know, these unranked guys. It's hard to say because they're still very green in his UFC career. I mean, he beat Jeka Saragit, which was a very favourable matchup. So we don't even know how he does again. He could get fraud checked in his next fight. But from the talent that he's shown on the regional scene and obviously that performance against Jeka Saragit, I'm going to say when he hits the top 10, that's where he's going to lose. Then we've got Mario Pinto, 10-0. Probably the only heavyweight prospect we've got right now. He's had one fight in the UFC where he knocked out Austin Lane. And I will say he didn't look unbeatable in the fight with Austin Lane. There were times when Austin Lane was tagging him on the feet and he arguably won the first round too. So when do I think he's going to lose? I think when he hits that top 7 of the division, that kind of second half of the rankings of the heavyweight division, that's where he's going to lose. He probably obliterates most fat heavyweights. You know, you give him like a Thomas Peterson or some of these other guys, he's probably going to absolutely run through them. And he's booked against Jonata Denise. Actually quite a tough fight. You know, Jonata Denise is one of the better fat heavyweights out there, but I'm assuming he's going to go out there and beat Jonata Denise, and then he's going to fight like a Marcin Tybura, a Sergey Spivak, a Martin Badai. In fact, not a Martin Badai because he's just been cut from the UFC, but you know, one of these kind of blobby guys in the top 15, beat one of those guys, and then he'll have to fight one of the top 7, the top 6, like a Wilder Cortez Acosta or a Curtis Blades or maybe even like a Pavlovich, and that's where I think he's going to lose. It's, again, pretty early to say for Mario Pinto. I'm not looking at this guy as if he's going to be the next Sergey Pavlovich, where he's, you know, just knocking everybody out. I don't think he's going to be the next big thing in the heavyweight division. He's simply just a tall, athletic guy with decent striking, which in the heavyweight division is enough to call yourself a prospect. So I think when he hits the top 7, he'll definitely break the top 15, especially if he beats Denise. But when he gets to that upper stage of the heavyweight division, that's where he's going to lose. I don't see him cracking the top 5. So I'm going to say when he hits the top 7 is when Mario Pinto's going to lose. Shavkat Rakhmonov, arguably top 3 best undefeated right now, 19-0. Obviously, known for his insane finishing ability, finished nearly every single one of his wins. One of the best submission artists in the welterweight division. It's quite tough for Shavkat. When do I think he's going to lose? I can't really put an exact fight, but I'm going to say likely his next 2 fights. Obviously, we've got JDM as the champion, and I could see his next 2 fights either being against JDM, if JDM beats Makhachev, or Sean Brady, or Kamaru Usman. I think these 3 fights, or these 3 fighters, are likely going to be Shavkat's next fight, and they're all give or take with Shavkat. So I think the two scenarios for Shavkat is scenario one, he loses to a top contender. Let's say you book him against Sean Brady. Sean Brady beats him, especially after the Ian Garry performance that Shavkat had. I can see Brady beating him. So he loses to a top contender. Or scenario two, he wins the belt and then loses in one of his defenses. I don't see Shavkat being one of these super dominant champions because, to be fair, you know, his best win is Jeff Neal or Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which ain't, you know, that impressive as a win. And I mean, I guess it's Ian Garry, but if we're talking on performances, he looked very beatable in the fight with Garry. So I could see like a Sean Brady beating him, or even a JDM. So it's, again, too early to say for Shavkat. I don't want to critique him too much because he's still undefeated with nearly every single one of his wins as a finish, and he's still a top contender. But I think he loses likely his next two fights. I don't think he's going to be a reigning champion. I don't even know if he becomes a champion yet. Likely his next two fights. Andre Lima, 11-0. Yeah, Lima's one of the better unranked guys in the flyweight division. Good submission ability, good grappler, decent striking too, quite well-rounded. Kind of does well, better on the ground though, if anything. When do I think Andre Lima's going to lose? I think when it hits the top 10 of the flyweight division. Yeah, Andre Lima, I think they're going to feed him like some unranked flyweight next. He was supposed to be booked against Felipe Benez. They're probably going to give him some unranked flyweight that he beats, and then he's going to get to the top 15. Now, I think he's going to, I can see him like beating one of the guys in like the top 15 area. I can see him beating like a Tim Elliott, a Bruno Silva, even like a Ramazan Temirov. I think he's when he gets to the top 10 against the likes of Manel Kapp and Azom Obayev and some of those guys like Amir Albaz. That's where he's going to fall short. So I think for Andre Lima, good prospect. I don't see him as the same hype as, you know, someone like Hyun Sung Park. I don't think he's that talented, but I can see him cracking the top 15, not cracking the top 10. That's when I think Andre Lima's going to lose. Mansur Abdul Malik, 8-0, undefeated. Had a quick start to his UFC career, just running through people, and I'd say he's got some of the best ground and pound in the middleweight division so far. So when I think he's going to lose, I think Mansur Abdul Malik is likely going to scrape the top 15 of the middleweight division and then lose. He fought Cody Brundage's most recent fight, and it was a headbutt KO. And I'm going to be honest, he didn't look great in the fight with Cody Brundage. There was very few significant strikes. He couldn't really land anything too significant over Cody Brundage either. So I think he loses to most of the top 15 as of right now. I can see him being at the same level to like a Jack Hermansson or an Abbas Magomedov, a Michel Pereira, a Brad Tavares. I think he's like the similar level to these guys. Might scrape the top 15 and then he'll come unranked again, kind of like a Chris Curtis when he was at middleweight. So I think he'll scrape the top 15. He's talented enough. He's dangerous. You know, he's undefeated as of right now, like everyone else on this list. I don't know why to point that out, but he'll scrape the top 15, and then I think he'll lose to one of the elites of the not one of the elites, but just anyone around that top 15 area of the middle. Like, for example, you put him against like Abbas Magomedov, it's give or take. You put him against Jack Hermansson, it's give or take. Anyway, Lonnie Kavanagh, 9-0. Now, Lonnie Kavanagh is one of the most hyped up flyweights right now. Came from the Contender Series, 2-0 in the UFC so far. Looked amazing. He's absolutely rapid as well. This guy's got so much potential, and I think he's probably the best flyweight prospect right now. So when I think he's going to lose, I think he'll lose, honestly, when he faces the elite. He's booked against Charles Johnson, which is quite a tough fight, but I think he beats Charles Johnson. And when it comes to the flyweight division, I think he beats most guys ranked number 15 to number 10. I think he beats most guys ranked number 9 to number 4 as well. I know it's too early to say that, but I'm just that bought on the hype of Lonnie Kavanagh. I think he's when he gets to the likes of Pantojas and Joshua Van and, you know, Moreno and Roy Val. I think the top 3, top 4 is where we're going to see Lonnie Kavanagh fall short because, yeah, I just think, obviously, the elite of the flyweight division, it's too early to say that he beats those guys, but I'm so bought on the hype of Lonnie Kavanagh. I think he can do big things in the flyweight division, so I think it's going to be when he faces the elite of the division, like the upper, like literally the top 4, top 5, is when he's going to lose. He's definitely going to crack the top 15, very likely going to crack the top 10. I'm bought on the hype of Kavanagh. He can do everything. He's rapid on the feet, he's got KO ability, decent grappling too, as he showed in his most recent fight. Bought on the hype of Lonnie Kavanagh. He'll lose when he faces one of the top guys. Nurullo Aliev, 10-0 undefeated. Aliev's got really good wrestling. It's kind of what he's known for, control wrestling. Not really the most dangerous guy. He's got decent wrestling though. When do I think he's going to lose? I think he'll lose in around 2 fights' time. He's probably going to go out there and unanimous decision a Khan in his next fight. They're going to feed him a Khan. He's going to unanimous decision them. I think he's when he gets to the level of like Rumbetske, Daniel Zellaba, Diego Ferreira, Ignacio Bahamondes, Chesu. But when he gets to this level, like the good unranked fighters in the lightweight division, that's where I think he's going to lose. I think everybody on screen beats this guy, so I don't see him ever cracking the top 15. He doesn't look dangerous enough. He doesn't look as talented enough, with all due respect. His striking hasn't really got going either. So I think it's when he gets close to the the top 15, when he gets in those fights, similar to like a Rambetsky or like a Bahamondes, that's where he's going to lose. Talented, I think he's a little bit overhyped though, so I think around 2 fights time for Aliev. Lerone Murphy, who's going to be on 319 as well, 16-0 undefeated. Lerone Murphy's well-rounded. He can strike to a decent extent. He can grapple to a decent extent. Obviously beating, I think, 3 ranked fighters right now, and he's obviously booked against Aaron Pico at UFC 319, and I'm going to go with Aaron Pico to beat Lerone Murphy. I'm going to do a prediction video on this card in a couple of weeks, but yeah, essentially I think Aaron Pico's going to chin Lerone Murphy for the reasons that I'll explain in the prediction video. I think Aaron Pico's one of the better guys, one of the better kind of fighters coming from a different promotion, coming over to the UFC. Great wrestler himself, comes from a wrestling background, KO ability on the feet. So when do I think he's going to lose? At UFC 319. I think at UFC 319 when he takes an Aaron Pico, fair play to him for stepping in on short notice against Pico, but I'm excited to see Pico. Like I said, I think he's going to be one of the better UFC signings this year, and I see him chinning Lerone Murphy. So I think Lerone Murphy will lose his next fight at UFC 319. Rafael Estevam, another undefeated flyweight at 13-0. Estevam, again, another decent grappler, really good control grappler. Doesn't really tend to take risks too often, doesn't really have that much hype around him, but he's still a good grappler in himself. When do I think Estevam's going to lose? I'm going to say about 2 to 3 fights time. He's booked against Felipe Benez next week. And I think he's going to beat Felipe Benez, and then he'll get to the flyweight division. I think he loses to most guys in the top 10 of the flyweight division. Probably beats like a Bruno Silva after that, but I don't think he's top 10 worthy. He's striking, hasn't really been going. He's quite inactive. He's not the most dangerous guy on the ground either. He's got good grappling. He hasn't really fought anybody good yet. I can see him cracking the top 15, but about 2 to 3 fights time, that's where I think Rafael Estevam is going to lose. Farid Basharat, 13-0. Farid Basharat, 4-0 in the UFC so far. Got some decent wins on there. Farid Basharat looks decent, but he's also very, very beatable. You know, we got dropped in his most recent fight against a Can in Victor Hugo. I don't see Farid Basharat as like the next big thing in the bantamweight division. So, honestly, I think he's going to lose his next fight. He's just recently been announced to be fighting Chris Gutierrez at UFC 320. I think that's the Abu Dhabi card. And I'm going to go with Chris Gutierrez to win that one. Keeps the fight standing, picks apart Farid Basharat on the feet, gets a unanimous decision win. So, I don't see Farid Basharat getting close to the top 15. I don't see him beating Chris Gutierrez. I think he loses his next fight against Chris Gutierrez. Yadier Del Valle, 9-0 undefeated. Very mixed record. Couple of KOs, couple of submissions, quite a few decisions. Came from a contender series and just got a submission of Conor Matthews in his debut. Yadier Del Valle, I'm going to say he loses in about 2 fights time. He looks pretty average based on his contender series performances, so I think he'll pick up a win or 2 and then lose. I just don't really, he's not like a prospect or anything. He's just the average unranked fighter in the division. So I think he'll lose in about 2 to 3 fights time, probably 2 fights time. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about Yadier Del Valle. But yeah, that's what I think every undefeated fighter in the UFC will lose when I think they're going to lose, whether it be their next fight, a couple of fights time. Let me know your thoughts on if you agree and if I missed out any undefeated fighters. I don't think I did, but if I did, let me know if I did. And yeah, thank you for watching.